And then when I saw that Lisa Williamson had already gushed about it, I knew I had to get my hands on it. And as soon as it arrived, Anna, I just devoured it. And I spent a really enjoyable time a couple of days ago rereading it ahead of this event, and it's really something special. So I promise you, I don't say this often. I don't chase publishers and say, this book, please let me do something with this author. And it's really worth ordering copies for yourself and everyone you know, basically. So
Nice.
hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Anna Goodall's amazing launch event, and I'm so proud to be introducing her today. Anna was born in London into a family of musicians, but amidst all the instruments and piles of music, there were also an awful lot of books. Writing has always been a way for Anna to connect with herself and the world, and alongside reading, the most important thing in her life. After working in publishing, running a small literary magazine, book selling, and very occasional journalism, Anna took a master's in scriptwriting at Goldsmiths. But instead of doing what she was meant to do, write a film, or at least a short film, she decided to write a novel instead. And I really approve of this life decision, Anna. Welcome to Anna. Maybe we could give her a round of applause. These things are so strange, aren't they?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Anna. I found Maggie Blue and the Dark World so unique and original, and actually quite hard to define, much like its wonderful cover. So I'm actually going to hand over the hard task of telling us a little bit about the story to you. And obviously this is a launch event, so as spoiler free as you can keep it would be brilliant.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks so much, anyway, for the introduction, and thanks to Kiran for being here. Maggie Blue and the Dark World, what is it about? When the book begins, we meet Maggie, and I guess she's not in a particularly good place. Her mum's in hospital with depression, and her dad has kind of abandoned the family, and she's been forced to move to a place called West Minchin, which is a suburb of London, to live with her Aunt Esme, who's kind of eccentric and who she doesn't really know very well, and who likes Schubert piano trios, which is what you heard in the intro. And she goes to school, she goes to a new school, and it's difficult, and she's lonely. And the one sort of defining thing is that she gets a bit obsessed, kind of half in love with the most popular girl at school there called Ida Beechwood. And the thing about Maggie is she's always felt different, and part of her difference is that she can really tell how people are feeling. She can really feel people's emotions in a way that's a little bit beyond the normal, I guess. That's not a great word, but for want of a better one. And when Ida suddenly disappears, Maggie's the only person who knows where she's actually gone, and she realizes that she's the only person who can save her, and that's really the beginning of her adventure. So that's it, really.
So wonderful and brilliantly summarized, and we'll learn more about Maggie in a bit. But first of all, I just found this book to be such an exciting fusion of genres and themes. When I was describing it to my husband, I was saying, but it's a fantasy, like a portal fantasy, but it's also a mystery, but it's also really about this, the relationship with the mother that you mentioned really had such impact on the page and was so wonderfully handled. Where did the original idea come from, and has it always been like this, or has it ended up somewhere quite different in its final book form?
I think the idea has always been the same. That was very strong right from the start. It's sort of hard to remember. I don't know if you find this with your books, but in a weird way, it happened quite organically, and it's quite hard to remember exactly where their ideas came from. But I think it was stimulated by moving, by place. So I moved from somewhere more central to somewhere kind of more suburban, and it was something about the area, which I also knew very well from since I was a child, that started to sort of stimulate all these thoughts and ideas about kind of the surface of what you see and kind of what's behind it, which I think is a sort of key theme of the book, really, on all sorts of different levels. And I think that's kind of where it started. I can't remember where Maggie kind of came from. It's almost like I know her so well now, and I feel like she's so real that it's sort of like asking where a real person comes from. I don't really know. But I think that the idea came from the place. That was the first thing that kind of stimulated the story. The idea of the two worlds, and the kind of somebody appearing fine and then what's behind, and kind of, I think that's where it started.
That's handled so deftly as well. I think I really found sort of the darkness that you start to seed from the very first page in this quite ordinary, as you say, suburban setting. And there's all these just the weirdnesses that you find in places like that, that are these sort of transitory places. I thought that you handled that really beautifully. And when she does eventually cross over, the way that sort of mirrors in some ways West Minchin, except things are external as opposed to internalized. It was really wonderful. And one of the things I most enjoyed was the imagination and how you'd clearly just given yourself license to basically go wherever you wanted with this story. And that's an incredible thing to do, and more so to pull off. And I was just kind of in awe of that. And was that something that, as you just said, the story came naturally, but did the telling of the story come naturally as well? Or was it something that you sort of, please tell me you struggled through multiple drafts?
Yes, don't worry, absolutely. I think, you know, I think the characters, I mean, Bella may disagree with me on this, but I think the characters were always incredibly strong for me. And I sort of knew the journey that Maggie was on. I think the thing that I worked most on in edits was the world that kind of had to keep on being clarified and clarified through each edit. And I did do a lot of edits with Bella helping me. So I think, yeah, I think Maggie was always there for me as this kind of guiding light, that I just knew her. But then the world, I think the dark world needed quite a lot of organizing. And actually, in the next book I'm writing, we're going to find out a lot more about it. But I kind of had to understand all that stuff now. And that was a bit of a process. I think that was the hardest part, the sort of most edited part, I think.
Was it about the rules, like you basically establishing the limits of the world, or the way it felt? Like, was it more to do with the magic of the world, I suppose, or the actual landscape?
Yeah, it was more like the sort of limits of it and the rules, because I'm sure you know this well. It's kind of, where do you stop? You know, once you start creating a world, it's pretty sort of macro, and in a way, writing a story is micro. And suddenly you're thinking, well, where does that bit of land actually end? And you have all these like random questions in your mind, and then some of them, because it's a story, you have to understand it doesn't matter. You know, actually, you don't have to fully. You know, it functions as a narrative. It's not like a map of sort of, you know, that someone's driving down the A1 or something, but at the same time you have to be totally in control of it and really understand all its machinations and stuff. And that's kind of opens, it spreads out, and the more you go in, the more it kind of spreads out, you know. And it's just a sort of ongoing process until you suddenly realize that you're kind of there with it, you know. It kind of takes a while.
And I think you do manage to achieve that thing that every one who's building a world manages to achieve, where it does feel like someone you could eventually, you know, get on the A1 and eventually get there. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
if I could get to the middle of the woods in West Minchin, I reckon I could get in. I wouldn't get out again though. Can we please, before we have your first reading, because I think you're going to do 2 shorter readings for us as opposed to 1 longer one, can we please talk about Hoagie, who is predictably my favorite character, and the cover star of your beautiful book. He's a wonderful creation. He's, if you haven't read the book, a one-eyed, jazz humming, streetwise cat, and he is just such a marvelous creation and a worthy addition to the pantheon of talking animals. How did he come about? Was he always there?
Well, this is the sort of strange kind of things drifting into my mind. I don't really know why I got so fixated on the idea of Hoagie, but he's actually based on a real cat. But a cat that I actually didn't get to know personally very well. It's quite a sad story, because I wanted to be friends with Hoagie, but Hoagie didn't really want to be friends with me. You know, that's the real life story, guys. It's sad.
Oh,
But
that is sad.
it is sad. But I basically used to walk past this cat on my way to the tube. And he was always there in the morning and in the evening when I came back. And he just sat on the doorstep. He had one eye. He was really old, and I was always trying to be friends with him, and he was just not having it. And I ended up meeting his owner, who's this amazing lady who's actually a jazz singer, and she names all her cats after jazz musicians. So he's named after this guy called Hoagie Gillette. No, I can't remember, but a sort of Hoagie Carmichael, that's it, a British jazz musician who I'd never actually heard of. And she sort of explained to me, he's so old, he's too scared to come and say hi. He just kind of sits there in the sun. And I don't know why, like, just for some reason, this cat just got into my imagination. And I just realized I know so much more about cats than I thought. I absolutely loved writing this character. I just knew him. I just knew him so well, and it was just so much fun. And I think also when you're writing about quite dark stuff, it's important for the reader, but it's also for the writer to have this kind of outlet where you can have a little bit of fun, a little bit of comedy. And I think he's everybody's favorite character. He seems to be on top of the list with everybody at the moment.
I mean, all your characters are wonderful, don't get me wrong, but he really does steal the show, and he does provide that sort of light relief that definitely we all need, let alone children. So I would love to hear your first reading, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
And I think you're going to read from towards the beginning of the book.
Yeah, so this, a little bit of background. Maggie has recently found out that Hoagie the cat can talk, and she's still kind of coming to terms with it. And this extract, she sees the dark world for the first time. And it's not actually a portal, it's more a kind of thinning between the worlds. And so she just becomes aware of it for the first time. Okay, that's it. Esme was out, and Maggie opened the back door and went into the garden. She walked over to the great oak at the back that stood near a part of the old wall that hadn't yet fallen down. She ran her hand over its ancient rough bark and said, "Hello." And in her head, she imagined that the tree said hello back. She glanced round to make sure no one else was in the garden or watching from a window. Then she slipped her arms around the old trunk and laid her head against the bark. Being close to a tree always made her feel better. She used to do this at home, and her dad, Lion, short for Lionel, would laugh at her and call her a tree hugger. She didn't understand why hugging a tree was considered silly. Trees knew more than people did. You could feel it, all that time and energy collected up in them for hundreds of years. It made you feel good to touch them. Suddenly you faded away, or not so much faded, more all this other stuff started to run through you and made you forget about all the things you were worried about. Okay, so you were rubbish at school and you had no friends, but the earth was moving round at 1,000 miles an hour in a big black universe that no one could understand, no matter what they said. And there were stars glittering in the sky. Even when it was the daytime, they were there. You just couldn't see them. And this oak had seen all this thousands of times, was maybe connected to the stars, Maggie thought, though she couldn't have explained how. She smiled as her skin rubbed against the gnarl of the tree's bark. Quite an embrace. She spun round. On the broken down wall, Hoagie was observing her, his one eye gleaming with amusement. Maggie frowned. Somehow she didn't feel so afraid hearing the old cat talk now. Maybe it was being outside in the garden and in daylight, or maybe her brain had had time to get used to it. She let go of the tree. Would you like one too? She moved with surprising speed over to the old cat, and before he could protect himself, she picked him up off the wall and gave him a big squeeze. Instantly, his sturdy round body became a mass of furry ripples, squirms and claws, and he fell heavily out of her arms onto the mossy paving stones. He ruffled himself, outraged. Don't grab me like that. It was a joke. Hug a tree, hug a cat. I don't see a connection. No, I suppose not. He shook himself again and observed dryly, so you've come round to the fact I can talk then? Maggie shrugged. Do I have a choice? The cat's tail flicked with irritation, but he said nothing. Can Esme hear you? She can hear me purr and meow and other cat things, but not like you can. How come I can hear you then? Search me. Why doesn't Esme like you? Hoagie's tail flicked violently now. Because she's an idiot. He wrinkled his nose as if smelling something unpleasant. Though I must say, for a miserable old bag, she has a stupendous social life. Maggie giggled. It's true, she's got more friends than me. That's not hard, said the cat, and began to clean himself yet again. Clearly, he already knew a little about her. Maggie sat on the crumbling wall, and Hoagie, after another violent shake, reascended to his perch. They sat in silence for a little while, looking back at the house through the unkempt garden. Do you ever get lonely, Hoagie? Lonely? Pah, that's human stuff. So you never want friends or anything? Cats want things all the time. I mean, maybe not friends exactly, but the key is that we don't have any self-pity. We want, we need, but we don't regret or worry. The concrete garages behind the flats next door were covered in a dense tangle of ivy and other weeds, and from out of the thick covering, a little russet fox poked his head. But when he saw Hoagie, he changed his mind and disappeared again. Or maybe it was because of Maggie. The trees and buildings were starting to fade against the pale sky, and a faint moon was just becoming visible above the garages. Thanks for having me in the bath the other night. I may call on you again. It was surprisingly cozy. Oh, no problem. They sat together, letting the dark and cold grow around them. Then after a while, Maggie began to feel a freezing wind at her back, as if someone had turned on a powerful fan just behind her. She turned around and looked into the neighbour's garden. She felt very relaxed and calm just then, and her mind felt very clear. That was when she saw them for the first time. 6 balls of light hanging in the air. They were like swirly yellow-white marbles, except they were the size of footballs, and they glowed like lanterns, hovering low over the perfectly ordered lawn that led to her neighbour's perfectly ordered house beyond. Maggie frowned because it seemed much darker over there, like it was somehow night already. Without thinking, she slipped over the wall and moved slowly towards the lights. As she approached, she had the strangest feeling that they could see her, or at least sense her. Now that she was closer, she saw that their surface was like skin, lots of tiny cells that moved and fluctuated, as if these strange balls of light had a pulse, as if they were alive. There was no obvious place where their light was emanating from, no bulb or flame or anything, and they just hung there in the air with no strings or supports. What were they? Maggie was so curious she forgot to be afraid. She wanted to reach out and touch one, but when she tried, something stopped her. Her outstretched hand hit some sort of invisible barrier. It wasn't a block or a wall exactly. It was more like a pulsing feeling that pushed her away when she tried to get close. Suddenly, the balls of light clustered together as if in conference. Then they rose up rapidly and zoomed away into the darkness.
That was wonderful. Are you going to have an audiobook at all?
Oh, I hope so. Yeah.
Oh, might you read it yourself?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, that was so lovely. I love hearing authors read their books.
Oh,
so now I'd love to hear a bit more about you as a writer and your writing process.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, I'll start with always my favorite nosy question. What were your favorite books growing up?
Well, I love that question as well. I've already gone on about this in the interviews I've done at such great length, but I'm just going to keep hammering on about it because I was so obsessed with it. It's a book called The Chrysalids by John Wyndham, which I don't think people read that much anymore. And I should be promoting my book, but I seem to be on this personal crusade to get everyone to read The Chrysalids. I think it was like the seminal book of my childhood. I just was completely obsessed with it from when I was about 9. And I was still reading it when I was about 12, and I still read it sometimes now. I just can't recommend that enough. It's sort of very dark, pitch black, post-nuclear world, telepathy, deviance. It's just got everything. It's crazy. And in terms of world building, it's one of the best pieces of world building I've ever read. It's just extraordinary. Then what else did I like? I loved the Susan Cooper books, the sort of Dark is Rising, Alan Garner. The Narnia books were massive for me. So I had a lot of these sort of magical, otherworldly books that I loved. But then on the flip side, I had these like sort of really, I don't know, kind of totally different books, like Anne of Green Gables, I absolutely loved. I'm trying to think what else. Like ballet shoes. I was obsessed. I like ballet. I was obsessed with ballet.
Love that
So
book.
I was kind of laughing a bit when I was thinking about this because I was thinking I have these like pitch black, really heavy stuff, and then I've got ballet shoes. So it's a bit of a mix.
But I think you can see in a really wonderful way all those influences on you, because this book, it goes some dark places, and I think it's so perfectly pitched the way it handles those. You could tell that as a child you had read some dark stuff because you knew exactly how to handle, because we love, like, who doesn't love a bit of, you know, horror or gore or fear?
Yeah. I mean,
oh no, please.
I was just going to say that I think that, you know, in a way you can explore darkness so amazingly in children's books in a way that you can't in adult fiction, in a strange way, and that children can actually absorb this stuff. And I don't know, I just think it's a really interesting medium for exploring darkness. And you know, when I think about the books I read as a kid, you know, a lot of them were absolutely pitch black, but I absolutely loved them in a way that I'd be terrified to read sort of crime novels now. I can't do it. But when I was a kid, I could kind of absorb it all, and I kind of love that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think kids are uniquely placed to take that stuff in, even if it does sometimes give you
Yeah.
nightmares. And we heard a little bit about your path to becoming a published author, but I know that some of the listeners will be interested in your particular journey. Awful word, but the only word I can ever think of, to becoming a published author. Did you always want to write? Was this something you always sort of had in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I mean, I remember being in primary school when I was about 5 and realizing that I wanted to be a writer then. I think, and kind of as you mentioned in my bio, sort of writing was always a really kind of like a psychic release for me. It was just my way of expressing myself the way someone else might play sport or paint or whatever it is. Like, it was just really important to me. I think it was quite a long journey for me, because it just took me a long time to even have the confidence to think that I could do it. I mean, I really struggled even admitting to myself when I got a bit older that it was something I desperately wanted to do. So that was my first big barrier, actually acknowledging to myself that I wanted to do it. I wrote a novel for adults that kind of got a bit of interest from some agents quite a few years ago now. But it's like, you know, when you, I don't know if you've had this experience, but it's like you just kind of know it's not right. And I think studying film really helped me, because in a way I knew I could write, but the thing I really struggled with was structure. And I think that's, if anyone listening has a bit of a problem with putting the story together or understanding how to get the rising action and kind of push the story forward, actually breaking down films and understanding how the narrative works is both really rewarding and exciting. It's much more fun than doing it with books. And it also really gives you some good solid lessons in just how to put stuff together. So I think for me, I always had that ability to sort of create place and atmosphere and character, but it was just that final building block, you know. So once I kind of done my MA in script writing and, as you say, decided not to write a film like I was meant to do, I just kind of have been working on these projects and nothing was working. I was working with all these people and everything kept going on the toilet. I was just like, right, I'm going to do something for myself, forget everyone else. And I think it was just that place also when you sort of release stuff, when you just think, I don't care anymore, I'm just writing this for myself, you know, you actually find more of a voice. And after that, I was just really lucky, which is also annoying for people listening, because I will assure you that people, you know, agents really do read their slush piles. They really do read them. It is always worth sending to agents, because it's not just something they just go, oh, and chuck in the bin. They will look at them. But in this particular instance, I was very lucky because, as Bella mentioned, Lisa is a friend, and she was kind enough to take that awful gamble of reading somebody's book and the fear that you're going to have to go, this was great, you know. And I just think maybe you could tweak, you know, the beginning, the middle, and maybe the end. So that was really kind of her to do that, because it's always terrible when when you read something rubbish and you have to pretend it's good. And then she put me in touch with Bella, you know, and I can't thank her enough, because Bella immediately got it and just loved it. And that's it, really. So I was just very fortunate. After quite a long time of soul searching and struggling, I just got that little bit of luck, which I guess, you know, maybe happens to everyone in the end. It comes along in the end.
Yeah, I think the role of luck and timing is always an undeniable part of anyone's writing journey. So
Yeah.
and I think I know the answer, but how did you find the editorial process? Did you I know she's listening.
It was a nightmare. No, it was actually, I mean, I it's sort of like you go through lots of stages. It's quite a strange journey, and I think what is great about Bella as an editor is that she never tells you what to do. She just points out the bits that aren't working. And, you know, I'm quite lazy in some ways, not in all ways, but sometimes I'll be like, oh no, I don't want to figure that out. But it's like, you know, you have to. And Bella just is like really politely just goes, it's not working, is it? Let's be honest. And, you know, and then you take it away and then you get involved in it again and you suddenly find this new bit of inspiration. And it was just like that, really. It was just a process of each time, I can't remember how many edits there were, maybe about 3. Each time just a new aspect would come out, and you also develop with the book and you change and you're different to the person that wrote it, you know, often quite a long time ago. And so all just, and suddenly you just realize it's right. You know, you just hit this point where you understand that that everything is suddenly flowing, and you suddenly feel so grateful that Bella pointed all these things out, whereas before you were like, oh, I don't want to
Yeah.
do it, don't. You're really, really grateful that you work through them all. These, it's like little knots. It's like having a knot in your back that someone has to like ease out. You know, suddenly it all flows and you realize it's right. So, you know, it's painful, a little bit painful, but it's also a really interesting process, and it does make it so much better. Everybody needs to be edited for sure.
Yeah, definitely. How long ago, out of interest, did you start, I suppose, the first draft, the first sketch? Like, what was the first moment?
It's quite a long time ago. I mean, I wrote it, I think I wrote the first draft in 2018, I think. So and it has changed, you know. It's sort of hard to remember, but I think it has changed quite a lot. And actually a lot, I think what's best about the editing process is that somebody can just see what's excess to the actual story that you're trying to tell. Because I don't know how you, but I often have too many ideas, and I just need somebody to say, this little idea is completely pointless, can we just get rid of this? It's like, oh, okay, you know. And it's sort of honing it down into its essence, basically. And that took a while.
But you got there, definitely. It's just so wonderful. What do your writing days look like? Are you a plotter? And I put it politely in my sort of notes to you when I was talking about what I'm asked, but I don't know if you heard the phrase pantser.
Oh no, I don't know that.
So it's a phrase in the children's book world that we use, plotters versus pantsers. So by the seat of your pants. So basically winging it. So
yeah.
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Well, I'm a pantser, but now I've got to be a plotter, because when you're writing a book sequel, when you're writing like a second book, you kind of have to make it all add up. So I have actually been plotting. I've been plotting recently, but I am a bit more of a pantser. Yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but
I mean, I'm a pantser, so I'm slightly biased.
That's reassuring.
Well. I think there are plenty of us. Everyone's different. So, yeah. And what have you enjoyed most so far about your publishing journey? Because obviously Bella mentioned publishing into a pandemic, you know, not ideal, but I so hope and know believe this book will find its readers, because it's just like the amount, it's just brilliant, honestly. And what have you enjoyed about your publishing journey so far?
I mean, loads of stuff. I think you know, I wasn't on social media, and I was like, I'm not going on social media, Bella. And then it was like pandemic. I thought I better get on social media. And you know, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. I think a lot of people do, but I think what's been really nice is realizing how many incredible librarians, educators, readers, just so much enthusiasm, and actually a fantastic community online for children's books, and people that spend their lives getting children interested in reading. I just find that really inspirational, so that's been really wonderful. I love getting reviews from kids. You know, I was much more terrified of children reading it than I was of adults reading it, and so when you get a good review from a kid, it's so brilliant. And I think my highlight was somebody actually dressing up as Miss Kane, who's rather an evil character if you haven't read the book, for World Book Day, and doing it like mid-shift. I don't want to give too much away, but it's like, yeah, she's a shifter. I was like blown away by that someone would come up with that. So
please send me a picture.
I will do. I think it's just the excitement of kind of people like the book having its own life beyond you, really. I think that's the really exciting part, and people making it their own and reading it, and it's in their head now. You know, it's pretty cool that.
It is amazing, and there are so many wonderful readers, as you say, to be found through social media. I think everyone, as you say, has that love-hate, that push-pull with social media, but the best thing is finding those people, and I know that there are quite a few listening tonight. So I'm going to ask you to do your second reading, and I'm also going to ask the audience to start having a think about questions. I know we've got a couple already in the Q&A, but just drop them in the Q&A, and I will make sure I leave time at the end for some questions.
Okay, so this is just a short extract. This is when Maggie actually crosses to the dark world for the first time. Sure enough, gradually she began to feel a foreign cold air flowing over her. She smiled, opened her eyes, and the paper slipped from her hand. There it was, the window to another world. Through it, Maggie could see more trees, but it was darker, and there were black leaves on the ground. She stayed very still. She took a deep breath. "Don't be scared," she said to herself. But she was. She was very scared. Her heart was pounding as she made herself recite instruction 2 under her breath. Draw close to the portal. Maggie walked slowly towards the shimmering window until she reached the edge of the other world. Or was it the edge of her world? The air got colder still, and she felt a breeze start to blow over her, as if a storm was brewing in this other place. The next instruction played in her head. She had memorized them all on the sofa last night. Number 3. Touch one edge of the portal. There will be power there. Allow it to flow. Maggie reached out and touched the left-hand side of the window. Its texture was unexpected, like soft rubber, and a sharp prang of electricity jolted through her. It was painful. It hurt her teeth and rumbled in her ears. But after a few seconds, it calmed to a pleasant hum that ran warmly through her entire body. Number 4. Rub your fingers together, gently, without haste. The edges between worlds will part. She obeyed, and sure enough, she felt the 2 edges separate. There was something warm and sticky between them, something like jam, as if the substance between the worlds had melted. Number 5. Release your world. The power will increase. Do not let go. Slowly, and using both hands now, Maggie managed to prise her fingers from the layer closest to her. Immediately, the current surged, far worse this time. Her nostrils quivered and her hair stood on end, painfully and from the roots. She felt aware of another presence suddenly. She looked up and saw an enormous heron on an overhanging branch, its huge grey body as still as a statue. She'd never seen a heron in the woods before. Was she hallucinating? But she couldn't think about that now. She closed her eyes. The last instruction was the easiest to remember, but the hardest to actually do. Number 6 simply said, "Jump." It felt like her brain was shaking inside her skull, but still she didn't let go. Tears came into her eyes. She gritted her singing teeth and counted down in her head. 5, 4, 3. Around her, the birds began to chatter hysterically as if warning her. 2, 1. There was nothing else for it. Jump! Maggie closed her eyes and flung herself into the space in front of her. Her fingers peeled away from the edge, and she fell for a long time through misty, cold air.
I had to take myself off video because I was sort of, it's just wonderful just hearing it again. Your style is so clear and so exact. I think it's really wonderful. And so Maggie Blue Brown, let's talk a bit about her. She's such a wonderful heroine, and I'm afraid I'm going to do the inevitable comparison and then move on from Lyra, because of her sort of her smarts, her anger, her way of seeing the world, I suppose, and of course her ability to get in touch with this other world. But she is, of course, very much your own creation. And you've already touched on this, but was it incredibly organic building her? Did she sort of show up in your head one day, or did you have to put a bit more effort into it?
I mean, I think definitely Lyra, was a huge influence, simply because, I read those books when I was an adult, but simply because I'd never really read a character like that, either girl or woman. I just thought she was so mind-blowingly brilliant. And I think that made me feel that I could write Maggie, even though they're quite different. So I do think, I love the comparison, and, it definitely influenced me. I think with Maggie, there is a sort of sense that you don't really know where the characters come from, but then there's sort of 2 sides. Part of you, the character takes over and you can't really remember how it happened. But then I think there is a lot of my own experience in Maggie. I think there's also a lot of almost like wish fulfillment, because she's so brave and she's so strong. Things that I don't necessarily feel are in myself. But I think there's a kind of strange, and again, you'll know all about this, I think there's a kind of strange alchemy that actually happens when you find a character that you love and you want to be with, because there are these building blocks and these influences, but ultimately it's suddenly just, they come together and they're just sort of real, and you can't really say anymore where they came from.
Yeah. And that is part of the magic, but it does make doing events like this rather tricky, because you're like, I don't know how it happened. Here we are.
It happened.
The dark world in this book acts so beautifully as a metaphor as well as an actuality. And how did you feel about tackling these, quite difficult, quite big subjects? You've got depression, which is handled so beautifully. You've got bullying, the anger management issues that Maggie herself experiences. How did you find writing those for this age group? Did you ever worry about doing that?
No, I mean, I think in a weird way, I never even thought about the age group I was writing for. I mean, I don't know if it's just because I've got I'm slightly underdeveloped or something, but I don't find it hard to sort of remember what it was like to be a kid. And I think your experiences are just as intense, if not more intense. And so I wasn't worried about writing about this stuff for kids, because I think, kids understand it all, they know about it, even if it's not their experience. I'm kind of interested in the idea of anger, especially in female characters, because I sort of feel that it's quite an unacceptable emotion still in female characters. But also maybe if you're a woman in the world, anger is not really something you're sort of allowed to feel. And I love that about Maggie. I love the fact that she shows her anger. And that was kind of a real pleasure to write. I think the idea is the depression that really underpin a lot of the book. I mean, I guess it comes from my own personal experience. I've had experienced depression, and I think it's sort of, in a way, it's hard to say, but in a way almost trying to figure out what that is, because I don't know for other people who've experienced it, but there's so many different factors. There's this sort of it's almost like physical and emotional and mental, and sometimes it almost feels like there is something physical happening to you when you have depression, and it's also interlinked. And so I think I'm just interested in that. And I don't know, I just, like I was saying before about darkness, it feels just like you can explore so many things. There's so much freedom in writing children's books, and it almost feels like you can explore these things more openly, or just with more freedom, I think. Yeah. And so I wasn't concerned about writing it for kids, really. They can handle it.
Yeah. And I think that's wonderful. I think it really comes across that you do really trust your reader. And also these are things that have huge relevance for children and the adults in their lives. So I think it's really wonderful to see it addressed in a book. So there are loads of questions popping up. So I'm going to not be selfish, actually. I'm going to end with one question, and then I'm going to turn to audience questions. So please do get them into the Q&A. So I want more. I really want more. And I was like, this can't be a standalone, and then turned the page and thank goodness it's not. So please, can you tell us anything at all about Maggie Blue and the White Crow?
Well, yeah, I can tell you a little bit. I mean, basically, Maggie is pretty eager to close the door on the dark world and forget all about it. And unsurprisingly, the dark world has other ideas. And I think this next book, Maggie's going to go a lot deeper into the dark world and what it means, and also find out how she's sort of inextricably linked to the place and actually the people there as well, how it's much bigger part of her life than she could ever imagine, and she can't really turn her back on it. And that's kind of what book 2 is about, exploring. So
wonderful. I'm really glad. I'm horrified that you're sending her back, but also really glad, because there is definitely unfinished business there. Right, so we're going to turn to some audience questions. Lots of enthusiasm and excitement, as is right. So let's go with this one first. Do you have advice on improving your confidence, and, as you said, writing just for yourself? I find the fear of others not liking my work, and then me as a person or author, a large barrier I have yet to tackle.
Okay. I mean, I think it's just one of, you know, in some ways these things happen right when you kind of let go. And I think the thing is not to worry about going through the process, because I think every single writer has been through the process when possibly you're copying the style of somebody else and you're not writing with your true voice. But that is also part of learning who you are as a writer. And, you know, I think it's tricky, you know, because also everybody has their own journey and everyone has their own way that they discover. But you've just got to keep writing. You've got to keep writing. And if something's derivative, you know, I used to have this thing where I'd read something that I absolutely loved. And I love all these like very literary, very depressive writers, you know, and then I'd start trying to write like them. And it's just, it's not me, you know, it's not me. Why am I doing this? I'm interested in the dark side, but I also have a very different side to my personality. And I think it's a lot of things that will come together. You'll get a lot of experience from writing. You know, I mean, I've got a room just full, I've got boxes full of my writing, endless notebooks full of stuff, ideas, pages and pages of things that never came to fruition. You know, it's like anything, when you actually hit the spot, there's so much stuff behind it, you know, and don't be afraid of that process. You know, very few people write their first or second or third attempt and it's like bang, it gets published. You know, there's a lot of years really of trying and getting inspiration and thinking to yourself, no, that's it, I'm not doing this, I can't do this anymore. And then 2 months later you're like, oh, I've got this idea for a story. And you know, it's just compulsive. And you know, you'll get there, you'll work through it, and then one day you'll just be writing something and you'll suddenly think, yeah, this is what I want to write and I feel good. You know, one of my favorite writers is not suitable for kids, called Atessa Moss. Yeah,
Sorry,
Atessa
my dad.
Moss. Oh, hi Kiran's dad. Atessa Moss, who's just this extraordinary, brilliant writer. And I just love her interviews as well. I really recommend reading her. She's hilarious as well. But she said this thing about how when you're writing the right thing, you get this energy and you get this buzz, and part of you knows it's right. And when you're going down the wrong path, not wishing to sound too sort of crystals and everything, but the energy's wrong. You know it's wrong. You might keep going down it for a while, but it's like also learning to trust when everything's working and just knowing, yeah, this is right. And I think you get better at that as well. And then you just need a little bit of luck, you know, and you will, and if you keep going, you will have times where you just feel like, I'm so unlucky, this is not happening for me. And if you keep going, one day it will just turn and you just get that little moment of luck and it'll flow. You know, it's basically quite a long, arduous process is what I'm saying, I think, basically, in a nutshell. Yeah.
No, that's a wonderful, wonderful answer. And you've got another lovely question here. I've just finished Maggie Blue 1 and loved it. Did you already have number 2 planned out when it was accepted for publication?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I think it's the pantser thing. Yes, I said it right. I think I always knew what the story arc was. Basically, I knew where the story's going, but there was a lot to work out exactly how I was gonna, or how Maggie was gonna get there. But yeah, I basically knew where I was going with it ultimately. Yeah.
Great. And what was, this is quite interesting phrasing, what was the most effective thing that Bella said to you?
Ooh. I can't remember. Let me think. Try
Effective is a
harder,
great
for
word.
God's sake, Anna. Back up, love. No, I can't remember. I think I can't remember a specific example, but I think with the danger of being a bit repetitious, it was almost like she was just prodding at bits that just weren't working, and just kind of she kept bothering me about them, and then, as I said, you know, I just go away and suddenly get new inspiration for it. But I can't remember an exact thing that she said, but it was just that constant kind of just asking me to raise the bar, asking me to reevaluate and rethink all the time, and kind of never letting me off the hook, but still being really nice and polite so I can get across with her.
Lovely. And someone wants to know your actual writing routine and your actual writing day.
Oh, no.
Do you do bursts or plod along? Do you get up at 9 a.m. or what's your, I suppose none of us have a proper routine in pandemic times, but sort of what does your writing day look like?
Well, you know, I sort of feel a bit embarrassed about my writing day because you know, it's fun if you can be one of these like really serious people. I sit and I write for 6 hours, you know. I have the attention span of like a 5-year-old. I basically sit down for about an hour and do something at about 10 o'clock, and then I have to get up and wander around and eat something and like look at something on the internet, and
So
then I go
familiar.
back. Yeah, and then I go back for another hour. So basically I think I can only really work very well for about an hour to an hour and a half, and then I have to go and do something else, and I'll do about 3 or 4 of those a day. And then at the end of the day I'll think, what have I been doing all day? I haven't done anything. And then after about 6 months I'll be like, oh, I've actually written something, you know. So it's a bit like that, really.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of something called the Pomodoro Technique, which is and it's because of the Pomodoro timers that you get in the shape of the
Oh
tomatoes,
right,
but
yeah.
it's just focusing for 25 minutes, like no interruptions, and then taking a 5 to 10 minute break and then going again. And I find that really helpful, because I don't think I can do an hour and a half even. I think 25 minutes is my
I'm probably
limit.
not doing anything in the last half an hour, to be honest. I'm probably just looking out the window. But yeah, that's a really good idea, actually.
Yeah, the Pomodoro technique is really good for anyone who struggles to kind of stay motivated. In the editing process, what was the hardest thing to let go? A word, a character, a subplot?
Yeah, I think there were things. That's a really good question, because I
Yeah,
think
great
that's
question.
another thing about the writing process, is that you do have to let go of a lot, and that's also where your editor will help you, because often you're quite emotionally attached to stuff that's not actually helping the story move forward, and you need somebody to kind of say, you kind of drop this. I think the thing I miss is some sort of details about Maggie and her dad. I had a bit more in about her relationship with her dad. Some quite like not necessarily happy scenes, sort of conflict scenes actually, and I think there's the only bits that I miss, because I think what's also interesting is a lot of stuff you're quite fond of you get rid of and you just never think of again, or at least I didn't, and then you realize, yeah, I didn't need that, I'm not even thinking about it anymore. But there's just a few moments with her dad that I quite miss, that I'm maybe scheming to bring back in. Bella might tell me again.
Or release like a director's cut, like make it 7 pages
Yeah,
long and we'll just
like
read
the
it
Blade
all.
Runner. It's like 1,000 pages long. Yeah.
We got some lovely comments. Someone saying that they totally were the same as you growing up. They read darker stuff like Lord of the Rings, but mixed it up with Anna Green Gables, Judy Blume, lots of ballet books, and Sweet Valley
Judy
High.
Bloom.
Which,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, Sweet
Judy
Valley
Blume,
High. Yes,
wonderful,
love
wonderful.
it.
So someone saying, wonderful interview. When will the sequel be published? Which I also want to know. And when will the Netflix series get made?
Oh well, when indeed? That's what I'm asking every day as well. When are Netflix going to call? I don't know about the Netflix series. I'm actually not sure. I think Bella might have to answer the question about when the second one is due to be published, but it might be at the start. No, I don't know is the answer.
Okay.
I'm afraid Bella might be able
Okay. I need to know that as well. So Bella, please text me or something. Someone saying, I love the front cover of Maggie Blue and the Dark World, and the front cover can be so important to attracting folk to a book. How did the Illustrator collaboration come about?
Well, I actually found Sandra, I can't remember how I found her. I was just looking for illustrators, and I actually bought some of her stuff. Like I bought a little print that I've got in the house, and I just had this really strong feeling that she was the right person. I don't know why. I mean, I loved her stuff. It was obviously great, but I just, because actually at first she was too busy to do it, and I asked Bella to go back and ask her again, because I just had this feeling. And basically she read the book. I think she read quite an early draft, but it was, you know, enough was there for her, and she just came up with 4 ideas, and they were all brilliant, but we just loved this one, and she's just amazing. Basically, I'm sad that she's not here, but to hear it, but she's just incredible, amazing talented person. So it was all her, basically. She's just great.
Well, she obviously was very inspired, so that's a great testament.
She loves cats.
Oh well, that helps. There's a lovely comment from Mel and Nick at their independent bookshop Rabbit Hole, just saying they'd like to thank you and Guppy for giving Maggie to the world. The gorgeous cover first attracted them to your book, but it was wonderful to find the interior didn't disappoint and even surpass the incredible exterior. And it's a gift of a book to hand sell in an indie bookshop, and they can't wait to be open so they can do it more.
That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much.
Lovely and very true. Will we see more of Maggie and Ida's relationship in the next book?
Yes, we will, and it's maybe a bit more complicated than you might think from the end of the first book. Yeah, we definitely will see more of them together. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I just recognize that so much, that crushing on the popular girl. Like, I thought that was so well done. Is your adult novel still unpublished? And if so, will you go back to it, or are you now too busy with your younger fiction?
No, I definitely wouldn't go back to it. I think it's a bit pretentious, to be honest with you. I haven't read it for a while, but I think it's a bit pretentious. No, I mean, as I was sort of talking to someone else, another question, it just feels like a really useful stepping stone for me, that I sort of realized that there just wasn't enough story. The writing was good, but what was it about? I think that was just an important developmental stage for me, really. Yeah.
Okay. You've just had a couple of lovely compliments, but I'm not going to read them to you because we don't have time. But which current children's writers do you read?
Well, actually, I've been reading Kiran's books recently.
Right answer.
That's not just a plug, but it's absolutely true. I just read The Girl Living Can Stars, which was amazing. I absolutely loved it. So I would definitely recommend her. And also The Mercies, which is not a children's book, but it's an adult's book. But that was really wonderful. It's very heavy. It's very intense. Talking about darkness, Kiran,
Yeah.
you're guilty of this as well, blimey.
I learned it all from children's books, though.
Yeah. But that is a wonderful book as well. And congratulations, I believe you've been nominated for a prize. Did I see that
Yeah,
today?
the Jarlath Prize for
Yeah.
a writer of colour has just been announced, and the long list is extraordinary. Quick plug for Jarlath Prize. Please do go check out the long list for the children's and adults, because they're wonderful.
And The Mercies is wonderful. I really recommend The Mercies.
Thank you. So basically me.
Yeah, basically Kiran. Just Kiran.
And what would you say the biggest benefits of publishing with an indie, especially a smaller one, are? And are there any downsides?
That's a really good question. I mean, yeah, the downsides are obvious, and it's just about power. It's just about money and power. You know, the bigger publishers have got more money, they've got more clout, and that's just an obvious one. I mean, what's wonderful about it is you feel that you're so central to what they're doing. They have a few titles and they really believe in them, so you really feel that you're part of something special, and you get to work so directly with Bella. You know, it's an actually really enjoyable experience. It's just it feels really good, you know what I mean? And what I would say is, you know, there's pros and cons to both sides, absolutely, and I'm not against the big publishers at all. But when I was a bookseller, we used to get a lot of authors coming in who were on really big with really big publishers, but they weren't like the kind of big names, and they were very frustrated about how much kind of you can kind of get forgotten in the big publishers, basically. And so one of the biggest benefits is that a small publisher is not going to take you on unless they utterly believe in you, because they can't afford to. They have to believe in you. And I think you really feel that trust and that connection in a way that maybe you don't with some of the heavy hitters, you know, so it's good.
Yeah, definitely. The stakes are higher, and I think the work that goes in, and it's the same with independent bookshops versus the bigger ones, you know, you can really feel that support and that connection. Right, so we only have time for one more question, and it is from Kathy, saying, how did you go about planning your series?
Planning it, well, as we've touched on, I don't know how much I did plan it. I think there is a point, obviously, where you have to sit down and kind of actually be a bit more of a plotter than a pantser. And I think for me, I always, as I said before, have a really clear idea of where I was going with it right from the start. I don't know why, that's just how it was. And then it just becomes like putting all the pieces together, and I honestly, I don't really know how it works, you know. I find sometimes that when you let go a little bit, suddenly the ideas come in. You know, if you sort of sit there trying to figure out, grinding out what happens next, you can get a very kind of formulaic, you know, you can follow a formula of plotting, but you kind of have to let the characters kind of live enough that they can, not that they can guide you. I get a bit annoyed when people say that, but just that these ideas just come into your head. You've left the space and you've left the airtime for those ideas to kind of flow to you. So you need a bit of structure. For me, this is just how I work. You need a bit of structure, you need a bit of an idea of where you're going, and then you just try and let the characters decide, you know, and you have to guide them a little bit because you need them to go in this little bit here and you need to get them there. But, you know, ultimately that should be what's driving your action and your plot. You know, I don't know if I answered the question very well there, but anyway.
I muted myself because I was listening. Yes, that was wonderful. And our hour is up and we have to let you go. And I didn't even get to ask all my questions, so I will be emailing you later. But just to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us for the launch of Maggie Blue and the Dark World by the wonderful Anna Goodall. This is a really special book, and it's not just a special debut, it's a really special book. And I think that the series is just going to be magnificent. So please do take advantage of that wonderful offer from Blackwell's where you can get signed dedicated copies. That's wonderful. Please support your local independent bookshops, and yes, get your hands on this gorgeous story because it's really, really, really worth a read and a reread. I think Bella's coming back.
Bella coming back.
Bella. I just wanted to say, sorry, me again. Thank you so much, both of you. That was just so interesting. Anna, your readings were wonderful. I completely agree with Kiran when she said you should do the audiobook. That's a definite now. Your voice is beautiful. So, yeah, absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much, Kiran, for such an insightful, such insightful questions and so interesting in so many areas of the writing life.
It was my pleasure.
So I think all we have to say goodbye and thank you so much to the both of you and happy reading, everybody. So thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.